I've collected 140 unusual historical photos that you might have missed. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. I will be very grateful to you. Between 1946 and 1948, John Cutler's team deliberately exposed more than 1,300 Guatemalans to syphilis and other infections without consent. Cutler later worked on the Tuskegee study, where black men with syphilis were deceived and denied treatment. In 1946, this 23-year-old Kentucky coal miner posed at home with his wife and young son. He had left school after 4th grade to enter the mines at 15, following his father, who spent 48 years in the coal industry. On November 11, 1989, a massive traffic jam packed the road to the Brandenburg Gate just 2 days after the Berlin Wall opened. Thousands crossed between East and West Berlin, turning one of the Cold War's most guarded borders into total gridlock. George Dilboy attacked a German machine gun alone, killed 2 soldiers, scattered the rest, and kept fighting despite fatal wounds. In 1922, Turkish troops desecrated his grave, so President Warren Harding sent an American warship to recover his remains. On October 19, 1915, Ernest Shackleton inspected the Endurance as crushing Antarctic ice slowly tore the ship apart. 8 days later, he ordered the crew to abandon it, beginning an extraordinary survival ordeal in which every man returned alive. In 1987, Karina Malinowski vanished after her car was found abandoned near her family's South Carolina home. 11 months later, her 11-year-old daughter Annette disappeared, leaving a note that said, "Dad, Mom came back, and I have to go with her." In 1920, a military coup seized Berlin, forcing Germany's government to flee and call a general strike. Up to 12 million workers stopped power, water, gas, and newspapers, while civil servants refused orders, crushing the coup in just 4 days. In 1939, this crowd gathered in Versailles to watch convicted killer Eugen Weidmann become the last person publicly guillotined in France. The disturbing behavior of spectators and secret footage of the execution pushed the government to move all future executions behind prison walls. A Central Intelligence Agency officer helps evacuees board an Air America helicopter from a rooftop in Saigon on April 29, 1975. Often mistaken for the American Embassy, this was actually 22 Gia Long Street, photographed hours before the city fell. Somewhere in France, a lone British soldier stands among thousands of empty artillery shells fired during the First World War. Each steel case marks one shot, revealing the terrifying amount of ammunition used to destroy just one part of the Western Front. In December 1928, Colombian soldiers opened fire on striking United Fruit Company banana workers, killing at least 47 people. United States officials and company representatives branded the strike communist and subversive, helping justify the deadly crackdown. Fellow protesters drag a wounded student to safety during Bloody Friday in Rio de Janeiro on June 21, 1968. The street battle against Brazil's military dictatorship left at least 28 people dead and hundreds injured. On February 1, 1999, Monica Lewinsky raised her hand before giving a videotaped deposition in Bill Clinton's impeachment trial. Senators later watched selected clips as she answered questions under oath about the affair that had pushed a president toward removal from office. This photograph shows Tokyo after Operation Meeting House, the deadliest air raid in history, on March 10, 1945. American incendiary bombs created a firestorm that killed about 100,000 people in a single night, more than either atomic bombing. On May 26, 1981, an EA-6B Prowler crashed into parked aircraft during a night landing on the USS Nimitz. The impact unleashed fire and explosions across the flight deck, killing 14 men and injuring 45. In 1998, Hurricane Mitch destroyed roads across Honduras, but the newly built Choluteca Bridge survived almost untouched. The storm shifted the river and erased its approach roads, leaving the strong bridge stranded beside the new channel. This photograph from London in 1890 shows a homeless girl holding her rabbit, possibly her only valuable possession. Thousands of children then survived on London streets by begging, stealing, or selling small goods, while shelters were overcrowded and dangerous. This 1917 Canadian photograph became famous because the man in a t-shirt and shorts looked strangely modern. Nicknamed the Surfer, he was no time traveler, since workers already wore similar clothes at the time. This is the surprisingly luxurious cabin of the Protector submarine in 1902, complete with leather seats and reading space. Designed by inventor Simon Lake, the vessel let divers leave underwater through a special airlock. Eamon Goethe stands on the balcony of his villa above the Plaszow forced labor camp, holding a rifle. Survivors testified that the commandant shot prisoners from this house, a terror later portrayed in Schindler's List. Italian soldiers load bombs into a Savoia Marchetti SM-79 in North Africa in August 1940. Known as the Hunchback because of its raised gun position, this three-engine aircraft became Italy's most effective bomber and a feared torpedo attacker. John Lennon and Yoko Ono wait as a hotel maid remakes their bed during their famous Bed-In for Peace in Montreal in 1969. From this room, they recorded Give Peace a Chance with dozens of guests. On February 4, 1912, Franz Reichelt jumped from the Eiffel Tower's first level to test his homemade parachute suit. It failed to open, and news cameras captured his fatal fall from nearly 60 meters. A German woman weeps among the ruins of Dessau after an Allied air raid on March 7, 1945. That night, British bombers unleashed nearly 2,000 tons of explosives, destroying most of the city center and killing hundreds of people. This is Dar ibn Lochman, where French King Louis IX was imprisoned after his capture during the Seventh Crusade in 1250. The city was named Mansoura, meaning victorious, after Egyptian forces crushed the Crusaders in the Battle of Mansoura. Charles Lindbergh testifies at the 1935 trial of Richard Hauptmann, accused of kidnapping and murdering his 20-month-old son. Hauptmann was convicted and later executed, but doubts about the evidence and claims of police misconduct still surround the case. The Japanese battleship Musashi twists through the Sibuyan Sea while American bombs explode around it on October 24, 1944. After surviving 17 bomb hits and 19 torpedo strikes, the giant warship finally sank with more than 1,000 sailors. On April 10, 1945, German flak struck the left wing of the B-24 Liberator Black Nan over Lugo, Italy. The burning wing broke apart, and the bomber rolled upside down before exploding in midair, killing 10 crewmen while one survived as a prisoner. The United Service Organizations was founded on February 4, 1941, to support American troops and their families. In 1954, Marilyn Monroe performed for more than 100,000 servicemen in Korea during a 4-day tour. Bob Hope sits beside war correspondent Ernie Pyle, who won a Pulitzer Prize for showing Americans the brutal reality faced by ordinary soldiers. Hope kept troops laughing across combat zones, while Pyle continued reporting until he was killed on Okinawa in 1945. Russian pilots on the Eastern Front wore heavy fur masks to survive open cockpits in temperatures far below freezing. Between 1914 and 1917, their greatest threats included frostbite, engine failure, and enemy fire. Nazi gunman Otto Planeta is escorted from court after being sentenced to death for killing Austrian Chancellor Engelbert Dollfuss during the failed July Putsch of 1934. Expecting deportation to Germany, he was instead hanged just 3 hours after the verdict. In 1998, Texas executed Carla Faye Tucker for killing 2 people with a pickaxe during a burglary. After converting to Christianity in prison, she begged Governor George W. Bush for mercy, but became the first woman executed in Texas since 1863. This rare photo is said to show the tomb of Abdullah, Prophet Muhammad's father, in Medina before its demolition in 1978. Abdullah died before Muhammad was born, so the future prophet never met his father. Georgian soldiers pose with a toppled bust of Lenin in Sukhumi during the war in Abkhazia in 1992. The shattered monument became a grim symbol of Soviet collapse as a brutal new conflict tore the region apart. This aerial view shows Ellis Island in 1933, with Manhattan rising across the harbor. At its busiest, the immigration station processed more than 5,000 newcomers a day, and nearly 12 million people passed through before it closed. In 1944, American forces captured German soldiers who were secretly building a weather station in Greenland. Their reports could help Nazi submarines predict Atlantic storms, making this frozen outpost a valuable military target. This Ohio couple survived the Great Depression in a single cramped room heated by a small coal stove. Their worn bed, bare floor, and patched walls reveal how poverty forced families to turn almost any space into a home. In the late 1800s, a locomotive in Connecticut crashed through a turntable and plunged nose first into the pit. Instead of clearing the scene, railroad workers posed beside the wreck, including a man identified only as Uncle Ellis. On February 5, 1926, young women in San Antonio replaced autograph albums with signatures written directly on their white kid leather shoes. Newspapers called this unusual fashion a more intimate kind of Valentine from favored friends. On February 6, 1918, Britain gave the vote to women over 30 who met property rules, while all men over 21 qualified. The breakthrough followed years of suffragette hunger strikes, arson attacks, and bombings under the slogan, "Deeds, not words." On August 23, 1989, about 2 million people joined hands across Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, forming a human chain nearly 600 kilometers long. The protest marked 50 years since the secret Nazi-Soviet pact that led to the Soviet occupation of the Baltic states. On her 63rd birthday in 1901, Annie Edson Taylor became the first person to survive going over Niagara Falls inside a barrel. She escaped with only a small cut, but later warned that no one should ever repeat the stunt. On February 3, 1926, builder James Taylor won the 13,094-pound contract to build Canberra's official home for the Prime Minister. The residence was later named The Lodge and became one of Australia's most important political addresses. On February 6, 1944, a Belgian commando inspects his deadly accurate Enfield No. 4 Mark 1T sniper rifle near Monte Cammino in Italy. Known as the Green Berets, these troops fought in Italy and Yugoslavia before returning for operations in Northern Europe. In 1937, Louis Hine photographed a coal miner cooking alone in his rough home at Sessa Hill. Immigration restrictions separated many workers from their families, leaving bachelors to live, cook, and survive alone, while wives sometimes remained overseas. At 2:17 in the afternoon, a crane collapse trapped 42 workers inside a shattered Dallas tower, yet the damaged floors somehow held. 4 minutes later, witnesses heard one deep metallic tone, while trapped workers discovered that the emergency intercom carried whispers but turned normal voices into static. My great-uncle, Robert Red Rolfe, worked at his New Hampshire gas station while waiting for the Yankees to approve a $3,000 raise. In 1939, he led the American League with 213 hits and 46 doubles. Charlie Chaplin stands beside Eric Campbell in 1916, the towering actor who became the Tramp's greatest screen rival. Campbell's massive frame and fierce eyebrows made Chaplin look even smaller, turning their size difference into instant comedy. The first Tour de France ended near Paris in 1903 after 6 brutal stages covering more than 2,400 kilometers. Maurice Guérin won by almost 3 hours, still the largest winning margin in the race's history. This staged photo shows a supposed cure for alcoholism using a massive dose of castor oil on April 23, 1916. The absurd treatment was likely created as satire, mocking the brutal medical methods once promoted as quick cures. In February 1926, grave robbers broke into Pancho Villa's tomb in Parral, Mexico, and stole his head. Emil Holmdahl and Alberto Corral were jailed as suspects, while a mysterious note claimed the missing head had been sent to Columbus, New Mexico. On Christmas Day, 1944, more than 100 American bombers struck St. Vith, a vital Belgian crossroads captured by German forces. The raid was designed to destroy roads, bridges, and supply routes during the Battle of the Bulge, but much of the town was also devastated. Sally Ann Jarrett was the loyal mascot of the 11th Pennsylvania Infantry during the American Civil War. She was killed at Hatcher's Run in 1865 and found beside wounded soldiers, and her stone figure now guards the regiment's Gettysburg Monument. A solitary figure stands in the ruins of the Henry House after the First Battle of Bull Run in 1861. Union artillery struck the home during the fighting, killing 84-year-old widow Judith Henry, the battle's only known civilian victim. German soldiers displayed dead rats outside a trench shelter during the First World War, when millions of rodents fed on scraps and even human remains. Soldiers hunted them with dogs, traps, and bayonets, but their numbers were so vast that killing them barely made a difference. On July 15, 1942, German submarine U-571 torpedoed the American tanker Pennsylvania Sun near Key West, igniting more than 100,000 barrels of fuel. 2 sailors died, but the crew saved the burning ship, and it returned to service the next year. A Navy Seabee stands over $350,000 in loose change aboard a troop transport in the Pacific. The coins arrived with reinforcements and were about to fund a secret American base during the war against Japan. In 1986, Chernobyl liquidators used wooden stretchers to remove radioactive graphite from the roof of Reactor 4. Photographer Igor Kostin captured these men working in extreme radiation, where each person could remain for only seconds. This rare 1960s photograph shows Khairul Atalfa, Saddam Hussein's uncle, father-in-law, and childhood mentor. Imprisoned after backing a German-supported coup in 1941, Talfa later wrote a hateful pamphlet titled "Three Whom God Should Not Have Created: Persians, Jews, and Flies." An American soldier watches Manila burn across the bay from Parañaque on February 8, 1945. The fires marked one of the Pacific War's deadliest urban battles, which killed about 100,000 civilians. This photograph from 1900 shows Antosha, a famous holy fool and wandering beggar at Cheremkovo Station in Siberia. In old Russia, harming such people was considered a grave sin because many believed they were close to God and spoke forbidden truths. Polish sprinter Ewa Kłobukowska failed a controversial chromosome test in Kyiv in 1967, and officials erased her records and banned her from competition. Years later, she gave birth, exposing how deeply flawed early gender testing in sport could be. One of the earliest known photographs of Pol Pot shows him third from the left in the front row at a Communist Party meeting in 1963. His Khmer Rouge seized Cambodia in 1975, and its brutal rule killed roughly a quarter of the population. John Schrank stands under arrest after shooting Theodore Roosevelt in Milwaukee in 1912. The bullet pierced Roosevelt's steel eyeglass case and folded 50-page speech before lodging in his chest, while Schrank claimed William McKinley's ghost had ordered the attack. This photograph from around 1978 shows the Hoffman Military Sports Group, the largest neo-Nazi paramilitary organization in West Germany. It operated legally for years, training members with weapons and military drills until the government banned it in 1980. The Lykov family fled into the Siberian wilderness in 1936 and lived without contact with the outside world for 42 years. Soviet geologists discovered them by accident in 1978, more than 150 miles from the nearest settlement. A British Operation Tabarin team surveys Vinca Island on September 22, 1944. 14 men were sent to establish secret Antarctic bases, watch for enemy activity, and stop Chile and Argentina from exploiting the war to strengthen their territorial claims. On January 5, 1975, a cargo ship struck Hobart's Tasman Bridge, tearing away more than 100 meters of roadway. These 2 cars stopped at the broken edge, but 4 others plunged 45 meters into the Derwent River, killing 5 motorists. In 1949, Polish mechanic Stanislaw Skóra hand-built this 3-seat motorcycle from the wreckage of a crashed plane, a destroyed tank, and a damaged military truck. Its engine used 2 cylinders cut from a German Messerschmitt Me-109 aircraft. A dervish scout watches from a treetop in Somalia, guarding a state built beyond colonial control. During the First World War, the dervishes aligned with the Ottoman Empire and fought British forces determined to destroy them. This 1984 mugshot shows Arturo Durazo Moreno, the corrupt police chief known as El Negro. A childhood friend of President José López Portillo, he turned Mexico City's police into a vast criminal empire and allegedly amassed up to $1 billion. This 1908 X-ray shows a woman wearing a corset designed by French doctor Ludovic Ofalawal. He used the new technology to reveal how tight corsets compressed the ribs, shifted organs, and restricted breathing. Hungarian engineers built the Big Wind by mounting 2 MiG-21 jet engines on an old T-34 tank. In Kuwait in 1991, its powerful blast helped extinguish massive oil fires within seconds. German SS troops moved through a shattered building during the Warsaw Uprising in August 1944, hunting Polish resistance fighters. Over the next 2 months, German forces destroyed much of Warsaw and killed up to 200,000 civilians. Swain Finch built this Nebraska home near the South Loop River in 1875 using rough logs and a sod-covered roof. Photographed in the 1880s, it shows how frontier families survived with local materials, livestock, and almost no modern comforts. President Jimmy Carter kisses Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis at the dedication of John F. Kennedy's library in 1979. That day, Carter officially accepted the privately built memorial on behalf of the American people, 16 years after Kennedy's assassination. Royal Air Force personnel inspect a Messerschmitt fighter brought down in southern England during the summer of 1940. Its twisted propeller and shattered cockpit reveal the brutal force of the crash during the Battle of Britain. On October 15, 1953, Britain detonated its first atomic bomb on mainland Australia at Emu Field. The blast had nearly 2/3 the power of Hiroshima, and its radioactive black mist later swept across Aboriginal communities. This 1930s police photo shows Harry Strauss, a feared Murder Incorporated hitman linked to as many as 100 killings. He carried no weapon to avoid arrest, then murdered victims with whatever he could find, including an ice pick, rope, or even a pillow. Soviet troops storm a German fortified position near Poltava in September 1943, racing past a burning Panther tank. The assault came during the brutal Soviet drive toward the Dnieper, which forced German forces to abandon Poltava. Baker exploded 27 meters beneath Bikini Atoll on July 25, 1946, destroying the landing craft that carried it. Radioactive spray contaminated the surviving target ships so badly that many could not be safely repaired and were later sunk. This is Frederick Fleet, the 24-year-old Titanic lookout who first spotted the iceberg in 1912. He survived the sinking and served in both World Wars, but died by suicide in 1965. On September 24, 1959, Vivian Maier photographed this exhausted man sitting on a New York sidewalk. The image remained unseen for decades, hidden among the enormous archive that made Maier famous only after her death. East Berlin, 1975. Endless apartment blocks rise behind a portrait of Erich Honecker. The image captures the massive housing program that gave many East Germans modern homes while surrounding daily life with state propaganda. This photograph shows an 8-inch British howitzer firing near Hennin-sur-Cojeul on May 27, 1917. Its violent recoil and blast filled the gun pit with dust, forcing the crew to work through near-zero visibility. Bobby Leach survived plunging over Niagara Falls in a steel barrel in 1911, but broke both kneecaps and his jaw. 15 years later, he slipped on an orange peel in New Zealand, injured his leg, and died from complications after it was amputated. An Austro-Hungarian soldier eats lunch in a front-line trench while keeping his rifle aimed through the firing slit. Even during a meal, one sudden movement beyond the wall could send him straight back into combat. These B-29 bombers from the 6th Bomb Group were photographed over Tokyo in March 1945. The handwritten date says March 12th, but the group flew no mission that day, making the daylight raid on March 4th the most likely answer. Benito Mussolini stands beside his wife Rachele during a beach outing in the 1920s. His stern pose reflects the tough, athletic image that fascist propaganda carefully built around him. Workers spread hot tar by hand on a New Zealand road in the 1920s. The job exposed them to extreme heat, toxic fumes, and severe burns with almost no protective equipment. This Soviet prisoner was photographed in the 1980s with Stalin and Lenin tattooed across his chest. On his arm, the words, "Thank you, dear motherland, for my ruined youth," turned Soviet patriotism into a bitter accusation. On February 7, 1991, the IRA fired 3 mortar bombs at Downing Street while Prime Minister John Major and his cabinet were meeting. One exploded in the garden just meters from the room, but reinforced windows saved everyone inside, while 4 people nearby were injured. Soviet troops trampled a captured Nazi flag during the Battle for Vienna in April 1945. Days later, the Red Army seized the Austrian capital after fierce street fighting against German forces. John liver-eating. Johnson was a Montana frontiersman rumored to have killed Crow warriors after they murdered his wife. Legend says his revenge lasted 25 years and involved cannibalism, but he later made peace with the Crow and called them his brothers. In Devon, England in 1942, farmer's son Colin Hoare returned home with 2 rabbits he had shot on his family's land. Wartime food rationing made wild rabbits a valuable source of fresh meat for rural families. Henry Robinson, born into slavery, smiles outside his weather-beaten home around 1937. He lived long enough to see slavery abolished, survived the Civil War era, and faced decades of segregation as a free man. On February 14, 1985, police arrested Stevie Wonder outside the South African Embassy in Washington. He was protesting apartheid, the brutal system that stripped black South Africans of basic rights. Born enslaved and joined at the spine, Millie and Christine McCoy survived kidnapping and became internationally famous singers. Known as the Two-Headed Nightingale, they spoke several languages and used their fortune to support black schools and their family. Village women washed clothes by hand at a communal waterside shelter, using tubs and the flowing water beside them. Even after the war, this daily chore remained a shared ritual that kept the community together. Motorboating appeared at the Olympics only once, at the London Games in 1908. Stormy weather wrecked the competition, and only 1 boat finished in each of the 3 races. In 1919, more than 350,000 steelworkers launched a nationwide strike for shorter hours, higher pay, and union recognition. Police violence, mass arrests, and company propaganda crushed the walkout, but exposed the brutal cost of industrial power. On May 23, 1934, lawmen ambushed Bonnie Parker and Clyde Barrow in this Ford and fired more than 100 rounds. The shattered glass, open door, and bullet-riddled steel reveal how violently their famous crime spree ended. On May 4, 1982, an Exocet missile struck HMS Sheffield, killing 20 sailors and setting the destroyer ablaze. The warhead reportedly failed to explode, but burning missile fuel caused uncontrollable fires, and the ship sank 6 days later. In 1948, mole catcher Jim Armstrong earned 5 pounds a week protecting 7,000 acres of farmland in Cumberland. In just 2.5 years, he trapped 27,000 moles and sold their skins abroad. Manfred Pernass was captured during Operation Greif after infiltrating American lines in a United States uniform. A military commission convicted him of espionage, and he was executed by firing squad in Belgium on December 23, 1944. On November 20, 1944, a Japanese Kaiten manned torpedo hit the fuel tanks of USS Mississinewa at Ulithi, triggering a massive fire. The oiler sank with 63 men, becoming the first ship destroyed by Japan's secret suicide torpedo weapon. The magnitude 6.6 Silmar earthquake struck before dawn on February 9, 1971, collapsing freeway overpasses and hospitals. I was 8 years old, and 55 years later, I still remember the terror. In 1944, a direct flak hit sent this B-17 Flying Fortress down in flames over Ruhlen, Germany. The bomber fell out of formation as the other aircraft continued through deadly anti-aircraft fire. This unexploded German parachute mine landed in a Liverpool garden in October 1940. Designed to detonate above ground, its blast could destroy an entire street. Yet this massive weapon failed and left the nearby house standing. In 1960, a man calmly reads beneath a tree as deer rest around him in Nara Park, Japan. For centuries, locals protected these animals as sacred messengers of the gods, and harming one was once punishable by death. In 1940, 21 coal miners crowd into a communal shower after finishing a filthy and dangerous shift underground. Washing off the coal dust was essential because miners carried toxic grime deep into their lungs, clothes, and homes. A nuclear blast lit the sky over Los Angeles at 5:20 in the morning on March 7, 1955. The flash came from a Nevada test site hundreds of miles away and remained visible for 20 seconds. Firefighters inspect the wreckage of a plane that crashed near Hollywood Airport. 2 of the 3 passengers were killed in the accident. Let's get 1,000 subscribers on this channel. I will be very grateful to you.